What's up, dads? We're back again with another episode of Kulture Dad's Age of Sword and Cassette. Today we're going to talk about something that is pretty cool, something I know is going to be popular with you guys, right? We're going to talk about both 8-bit aesthetics, or pixel art, I guess what some people call it, 8-bit aesthetics, and dungeon synth. So I know a lot of you guys listening are on the level. You guys are on the wavelength. You guys are vibing with us on this one. And I absolutely loved prepping for this episode. I love prepping for I love all of our episodes. There's certain ones where you kind of rediscover things that you just love, that are just great. And you go down rabbit holes, and it's like the old day. Because I remember, way back when I really started getting into underground metal, right? When I started getting into underground music, period. The internet was kind of new. It was not, there was no Amazon. There was no, it was like America Online type stuff. Dial up.
This is way back, like 90s or something.
We're talking late 90s. Yeah, we're talking late 90s. So late 90s. Yeah, maybe going into early 2000s too. Yeah, this is still pre-Amazon. This is still dial-up era.
When I got mail.
Yeah, yeah, dude. I'm like one of those people that when I hear that with the dial-up sound, it's like, it just gives me the nostalgia.
This digital like noise squall is very nostalgic for me. Actually, that's a good segue into the topic. Anyway, go on.
So what I loved back in the day, this is how it worked back in the day. If you wanted to find underground music or underground anything, you had to go search of blogs. There was this one website that was kind of like the king. It was called Metal Archives, metal-archives.org, I believe. I think it's still around. And you would be able to, they just had every metal band ever, every band member ever, every other band they've ever been in, all of their albums, everything, right? Plus reviews. And I would just leave reviews and find new bands and order cassettes and CDs and stuff. It was fun. It was cool. And getting into the dungeon synth thing, that was like I digging down into dungeon synth. And when I now today buy dungeon synth albums on cassette or CD or whatever, which a lot of them all do. Some of them refuse to have, like, some of these dungeon synth record labels refuse to do digital, which is, I think it's hilarious and just based. But as a whole, this whole aesthetic of DIY, of like primitivism, like, I don't even know what the futurist primitivism, digital primitivism, whatever you want to call it. And a lot of this ties into the other thing we're going to talk about, which is 8-bit aesthetics too. Because over the last few weeks, I've been really getting into retro gaming. I like a lot of you guys, I still play not a lot of video games, but I play a fair amount of video games. I like to play, 20 minutes or something before bed, usually a few nights a week. An hour before bed sometimes. Sometimes if I really get into a game, I'll sit down and play an hour a day or something like that. You know what I mean? It's just something that I like to do when I unwind. You know what I mean? I enjoy the art of video games. And getting ready for this episode, I did the Dungeon Synth dive, but I also went back and I just played a ton of these old 8-bit, I guess 16-bit, these old school pixel art, pixelated video games, right? The first Final Fantasy, old school Star Ocean, Shadowrun, Shining Force, just a ton of them. I didn't play them all to completion, but I got in, I played around, I played for a few minutes here, there, get the feel, get the vibe. And then things like Road Rash and Mortal Kombat, and just about anything that came up on my list, because the retro gaming scene, the emulator scene or emulation scene, is very much of the same vibe. First of all, it's like gangster as shit, right? Yeah, you're not supposed to be doing it. It's pretty illegal to be doing all that. At least it is, certain ways, right? If certain people in certain ways, I guess I should say. So there is definitely this kind of underground DIY kind of vibe to it. You get these emulators for your computer. It's mainstream gaming nowadays. It feels like old school gaming. Old school gaming, when you did computer gaming, you played CRPGs or you played some of the early computer games. It was up to you to troubleshoot. It was not reliable sometimes. It was a little janky. And if you wanted to find information on how to fix it back then, you had to go find some obscure forum, ask a question, wait a couple days and check back, and hopefully somebody answered with the good information. You had to buy a manual or a book, or you had to it was not as easy as it was to figure out back then. And nowadays, modern gaming is, you buy the console, you buy Steam or you get Steam for your computer, and you buy the games, and they just kind of work. And it's very user. The same thing with computers too. I miss the days of where only there was kind of a floor for which you had to go on and play games. If you were a retard, you weren't playing games because you couldn't figure it out. So only really kind of smart people could actually have access to playing games, access to computers. So the internet in the early days, outside of AOL chat rooms where the retards gathered, that was the funny farm. You had people that actually kind of knew what they were talking about, and at least were, somewhat intelligent and were into it, like into the tech, right? They were smart guys. Nowadays, it's like completely open, absolute, just the horrors of the retarded mass have just gathered in, have come pouring in, and have just taken hot craps all over. It's like the Ganges River or whatever, where they all just take dumps and throw corpses in it, and it's just they bathe in it. It's disgusting. It stinks. That's what the internet is now, because we have so many retards. So anyway, before I keep yapping, going in and getting into these, just the experience of getting access to these old pixel games felt like getting access to the games from the days of yore, and sitting down and playing it and looking at the aesthetic itself gave me a bunch of ideas, and a lot of feelings came rushing back and all of this. But I've been yakking. Mike, I know you got something to say about 8-bit aesthetics.
Oh yeah, for sure, man. Actually, that what you were saying there, it took me back to my high school days, because when I was in high school, I was a kind of an odd man out in that I straddled both the nerd, nerd scene or friend group or whatever, and I was also kind of in with the people who were I guess popular or whatever, because I don't know, I was a musician and I'd grown up with a lot of these people and I just knew them all and everything. But I was also a burgeoning computer programmer. And back in the day, it was I was learning C++ in 1995 with the help files, and that's it. There was, I might go on a fucking BBS forum for help, man, or something, you know what I mean? It's just extreme, I was living in the fucking dark ages. And I just remember how, what a massive learning curve that was. I had already mastered QBasic, but the jump from basic to C is fucking huge. And to basically have to, it was me and my buddy who were basically teaching ourselves and from the help files. And, I don't know what it's like now, but back then they were just extremely user unfriendly. And it just, what you were saying just threw me back into those days of having to manually configure DOS and like troubleshoot your computer just like with Windows 3.1 or whatever. Oh my God. Yes, no, you're right. It's nowadays we kind of take for granted how easy computers are. Even like Windows computers, which are kind of like considered to be the ones. I mean, I know like people are like, some guys are like Linux hounds, but Windows computers are like the ones that are like customizable, and you gotta kind of like know things a little bit, troubleshoot or whatever. Mac is just for people who don't like computers and want to just get on with the job. Back in the day, it was a lot worse. Anyway, yes, 8-bit aesthetics. I mean, it's an important part of my childhood. It was an important part of everyone's childhood that, like, we're talking to. I mean, there's probably some people who are like in their 70s and 80s that didn't have anything to do with it, but it's certainly important to most people who are like, let's just say under 50 years old. And for me, like RPGs were probably like the most important part of that. And I played all the Final Fantasies, all the Dragon Quests up to 5, and then later I got into them. And, Final Fantasy games, there was only 3 of them that were released for the American consoles, or like, Western, like, outside of Japan. But there were 6 games. So there were 3 that we missed out on. And it wasn't until much, much later, when I was in my 30s, that I had like got access to like a translated ROM or whatever of these games. And I just remember playing them and getting this weird vibe, this feeling of being nostalgic for a game that I'd never played before, like going through and playing like Final Fantasy 2 and 3 for the Super Famicom, having never played through them before, but it's got all this, like, it's the music composed by the same guy with the same like pixel art, the same vibe, the same aesthetics, the same everything, the same quality, and just being like, oh, this is amazing. It's like rediscovering like a little sort of corner of your childhood that you forgot about or something. It's so good. And yes, I mean, part of what makes it good is the pixel art itself. It's the nostalgia for that aesthetic. And even later on than that, after sort of like replaying a bunch of games from my childhood and then moving to Australia and getting busy with like, trying to get like, restart my career that had basically, like, when I left Canada, I was in the music industry, and I left all my contacts behind, which meant starting from zero. Had to hustle to kind of get things going, and forgot about games again for a long time, until another game came along that really set me onto it, and that was Minecraft. Minecraft definitely leans very hard on that, like, pixel art aesthetic. It's obviously 3D, but it's like 3D in such a way that it totally activates all the same like neuron responses and everything that like playing through Final Fantasy 1 does and stuff like that in its own world, in its own way. I love that. It's like my favorite video game that's been made in the last like 20 years or something like that. And it was also great to discover Monster Sanctuary when we played that a couple of episodes ago. And actually I've continued to play through that a little bit, which is funny. It's like, the first game that I've like played really like in any extended way since Minecraft, and my kids love it and they want to play it all the time now. Which is funny. You've turned them into little video game junkies, Dave. So. Oh no. Thank you for that. No, that's good. That's good. It's a little bonding thing with Dad. But yes, 8-bit aesthetics they are part of the cultural fabric today. They're part of the backdrop of life. It evokes a certain feeling, a certain cluster of constellation of feels for us. It's definitely nostalgic. It's definitely comfy and cozy, and it just feels kind of like this time and place. It's very Tyrrhic in that way. It's really cool. But also there is some depth to it as well. There's the the aspect of, like you mentioned, minimalism. At least I think you mentioned that. Maybe I just heard that. But minimalism is an important part of any artistic endeavor. It's like just the aspect of doing a lot with a little is so important to art. Like, art is creativity within constraint, and any artistic medium that lacks constraint or that's too open generally tends to lack vitality, and it tends to not really sort of hit us in the gut, and it's just sort of somehow it's stunted in some ways. And 8-bit pixel art, before we move on to Dungeon Synth, pixel art itself very much hits all of those notes. It's absolutely working within, I mean, I'm just like from a purely visual standpoint, like it's low resolution, so it's got to kind of like fill in the gaps, right? Like you've like literally like you've only got like a certain number of pixels to work with, and it is like it's got to evoke a certain vibe and everything like that. So this is really, it really stretches your artistic potentialities, and it's the kind of thing that you really need to have hone your craft to be able to make this shit work, to do things like, you know, we're not just talking about like visuals as well, like necessarily. We could be talking about stuff like chip tunes, which is a whole genre of like music composed, like newly composed NES soundtracks for games that don't exist and stuff like that. Like, this is a whole subgenre of you know, all that, like that kind of stuff. And some of what actually is out there in this genre of you know, fake NES chip tunes, or like, you know, Mega Man 10 zillion or whatever it is, with like, you know, people just inventing like different like Mega Man bosses, and then like just like composing the soundtrack to the level and everything like that. It's you need to have a large amount of creativity to be able to make that work. And just like even the format of the NES composition, you know, for video games, I think at some stage we'll probably do a whole episode on like video game music itself, because it really is its own phenomenon. It has its own demands, its own constraints, its own structure, and everything like that. But one of the important aspects of video game music, at least in the early days, is that these were, because of the limitations of the chipset, these songs or compositions necessarily had to be very short, and they only used a very small number of voices. So I think it's like 3 voices for the NES plus a sound effects module or whatever. So up to 3 voices at any given time. And generally, just because of the constraints of like, you know, space, like storage space in these cartridges, you know, you'd be limited to something like maybe 50 tunes, each of them spanning an average of like 8 seconds or something like that. You know what I mean? So this is like extreme compression in terms of your creative, the creative demands placed on the composer, right? Because here is a song that might have to repeat over and over and over again. And, you know, as the player is playing through the game, if it's something like Final Fantasy and you're playing through the battles, right? How many times have you heard like the battle, like, you know, like how many times have you heard that fucking song? You've probably listened to that tune. If you're like me anyway, you probably listened to this tune for something like, oh God, like maybe
thousands of times.
Well, I'm just trying to think, like, yeah, like 96 fucking hours.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah. So the song has got to be, it's got to catch you. It's got to be good. It's got to be exciting, or it's got to evoke some sort of mood anyway. And it's got to be repetitive, but not get old. So good luck squaring that circle. And this is where the genius of like a composer, like a Nobuo Uematsu, or you know, the guys that did the Dragon Quest series, for some reason the guy's name is escaping me, but these guys had to be on top of their game as far as like composition and everything. Now, of course, there are many games for the Nintendo where the music is just fucking annoying, but there are some that really rise to the level of like true art. And it's because of this constraint within, or this creativity within extreme constraints that like places pressure on your artistic abilities. And some people rise to that challenge. And in some ways, it actually reminds me of the like 12-tone composers of the early 20th century, and people like Anton Webern or Alban Berg, guys like that were working with very, very constrained frameworks for their compositions. They had to be just so in this way and that way and everything. But what they came out with, at least some of it, a lot of it is fucking garbage, but some of what came out of that was absolutely sublime, because they were somehow able to do so much with so little. I'm thinking especially of Anton Webern. Like, he has some absolutely amazing compositions that he's not so much a 12-tone, but he's working sort of in that same idiom. And I actually wrote an article like ages ago, like long before Imperium Press. I had my own blog. It's completely been fucking scrubbed from the internet. Nobody's ever going to find it. Thank fuck for that. But like, one of the articles I wrote on it was basically saying just this, saying that like video game music is real art. And because of this creativity within constraints, and making the comparison specifically between Nobuo Uematsu and Anton Webern. And I had a lot of like bros coming at me, like serious, because I was on Reddit. I was like posting it all everywhere on Reddit, on the classical music forums and stuff, because, you know, I was giving like, you know, deep analyses of these like, you know, Final Fantasy tunes vis-a-vis the you know, Second Viennese School or something, and these guys were not fucking happy. They didn't like it. They were like, "This is not serious music. This is bullshit." And you're calling us Philistines? What the fuck? You know, like they were not happy about that. But I think the time has come. I think, you know, I probably wrote that 2013, 10 years later. I think if I posted that today, which I won't, but if I did, I think it would meet a very, very different reception than it did back then. We have enough distance between ourselves and the 8-bit era and the 16-bit era where we can now look at it with some detachment. It's not just nostalgic. There's a whole generation of Zoomers that never experienced the NES when it was like, you know, had games coming out for it.
Yeah.
But now we can kind of look at that shit with some historical distance, and we can see that it was in fact legitimate art. And yeah, chip tunes, 8-bit aesthetic, all of that, it still resonates. It's still vital. It still hits us hard. And yeah, it's because of this constraint thing, I think. That's why.
Yeah, you know, there's sometimes Zoomers get hammered as being like nostalgia vultures, right? Because, you know, they have this. It's really strange. It's not like how we growing
I'm nostalgic as fuck too, man. I would not begrudge them that. I think nostalgia is a very important thing, actually. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I do too. I think nostalgia is a special thing, and I think that sometimes we're too quick to label things just as like, oh, that's just nostalgia. I hate that. Like I bring up things that I'm really passionate about, that I'm like, this was legitimately better. This was really, really special. Oh, you're just a fucking wearing nostalgia goggles. They say that. Yeah, go fuck yourself with that. And let me point this out. And this is why I think that, you know, that accusation, and then also the Zoomers getting called nostalgia vultures is fucking wrong, because these things that they're liking, how it's like it's literally impossible for them to be actually nostalgic for. They weren't alive. They were like born when PS1 dropped. They were babies when we were playing PS1 and PS2. They didn't even get to play video games until like Xbox 360. You know what I mean? Like that Xbox 360, maybe GameCube were like the first consoles that they got to play. We got to keep in mind These motherfuckers, they were born in like 2000, 2001, 2003. Yeah. You know what I mean? They weren't even like conscious until, you know, we're talking.
They have zero overlap with my personal video game experience, except for the stuff that came later. Like I would like the video game train. I had already gotten off of it by the time they were even born, much less playing games and everything like that. So, you know, we inhabit like different generational worlds of video games, and yet we can see eye to eye, me and many of them, on like what is good in video games and like which ones are classic and stuff like that. That has got to say something about like the validity of this like cross-generational appraisal of these games.
My sons, so my oldest son is 8, my middle son is 5. They love Mario and Sonic. Like they love Mega Man. They like these old school games, these old retro games. They like them better than new games. They even like the early 3D games better than new games. We're talking, you know, Banjo-Kazooie, Jak and Dexter, those kinds of games. They love those games. The early 3D adventure games. They love that shit. They like it. They don't really even play too much of the new stuff, right? There is something there that is evidence that these things were just awesome and special and one of a kind and legitimate art forms. These were legitimate cultural innovations, right? And the reason that we like them so much and we prefer them so much and they get us so excited, yeah, nostalgia's in there too, but nostalgia's a good thing. But it's also because they are just legitimately awesome. It's not like boomers, but yeah, remember when we used to wear bell bottoms? It's not like that. You know what I mean? It's completely different thing. And also so when it comes to 8-bit, I'm just going to go right into my 8-bit aesthetics thing. So I have been playing, as I mentioned before, the early JRPGs, early fighting games, some platformers. I was playing OG Castlevania. Right, I've been just like monkeying around, messing, because I have this emulator now that literally has every game ever made. So I'm going through and I'm playing them, and I'm having fun doing it, and I'm checking them out. And it's sort of like this week's been like an intellectual exercise almost, because I'm looking at that and I'm like, what makes these games so special? What makes these games so special? Outside of memories, outside of us associating it with part times of our lives, outside of associating it with a pure, better time in our countries, in and of itself, as cultural artifacts, as art forms, what really makes them special? And one of the things that clicked on me, and this is one of my ideas on why 8-bit aesthetics are so powerful to us. Go talking about this a little bit with my buddy American Krogan. I did a stream with him yesterday. We touched on it, and me and him been actually talking about this. I played one of my favorite games when I was younger was the original Star Ocean for the PS1. I played it on the PS1, or I guess it was the second Star Ocean. It was called Second Story. Going back and playing it on the PS1, I have some critiques. Some of the characters were really dumb. You know what I mean? It wasn't quite as cool as I remembered it. I do have some critiques, but it is an 8-bit game. It's a isometric pixel art game. And I'm playing it, and I'm playing that, and I'm playing OG, Final Fantasy, and Shadowrun, and all this kind of stuff. But I'm playing Star Ocean. I play through it a little bit. And I get the remake that came out for PSP, like, I don't know, like, I guess it was like 8 years ago, 10 years ago or whatever. And I switch over. I was like, oh, let me try the remake. I fire up the remake. And instead of just little text boxes, like dialogue boxes coming up on the screen, they now have little anime characters that come up. And we're not going to go into why I hate anime. We're going to leave anime out of this. But little anime characters come up and they have voiceover now. They have voiceover dialogue with this. In between the different parts, there's animated cartoon cutscenes. It fucking ruined it for me. I hated it. And let me tell you, I found it just jarring and it was like it like robbed the whole everything I liked about it. And then I realized something about 8-bit and about the game before and about reading the text of the dialogue and about these little tiny sprites on the screen. Why I found it so jarring and why I hated it so much is because it took my imagination out of the equation. Because what I realized was with 8-bit aesthetics, with old school games to have the sprites and have the stuff, that is just what only half of the game is on the screen. The second half is in your imagination. I hated the remake of Star Ocean because the guy that did the voiceover sounded nothing like the voice in my head. When I read the dialogue boxes for these characters, I give them voice, I give them personality, I give them inflections, I give them mood, I give them tone, they manifest in my mind. My imagination fills the blanks, right? The little guy on the screen, the little sprite is just like, here's where it's just like a representation on the screen, just to kind of like give your imagination where you're at and guide it. You know what I mean? In your head, you picture what these characters look like. You picture how they act. At least I do. So when they added all that shit, it like ripped away everything that I loved about the game and made it suck for me. 8-bit aesthetics, in my opinion, here's my deep take. When you look at 8-bit aesthetics, it's only giving you 40%, 50, 60% of what that is trying to convey. The rest is pieced together in your imagination. So when you look at a pixel art, and let me tell you, some of this pixel art that guys are doing out there these days, it's just beautiful. Magnificent stuff that these guys are making. It blew me away. I was going through like different blogs and art sites, like looking at guys' creations. Some of this stuff, I was like, oh my God, this is magnificent. I was like, I couldn't even believe that it was pixel art. I had to zoom in real small to see if it was pixels. Now, obviously, these guys are working with, I don't know, 128-bit or like whatever it is. Like they have much smaller pixels than what we're really talking about, but there's a lot of stuff that guys are using the bigger pixel size, and it's like beautiful because some of the edges around get a little bit like they do this thing where it blurs out, like it blurs around the edges to kind of like I
hate that anti-aliasing, I think it's called.
Yeah, but there's certain things that they do that like give it a certain quality. But when I'm looking at this, I realized that when I look at this awesome picture of this castle that somebody made, this fantasy castle, and there's like a little bit of fog and this and that is what that is doing is transposing that into that imagery into my head to fill it out the rest of the way. So long story short, my take is that when you look at 8-bit as opposed to something that is photorealistic or full on 3D or whatever, it is forcing you to use your imagination to fill in the gaps. It's like this two-way street of you and the artist together are creating this imagery or creating this fantasy, creating this world. Whereas modern games, the photorealistic stuff, have none of that. You're just kind of looking at something that exists. There is no imagination that goes along with it. You don't have to do any work on your end. It's not a two-way street. And I think that when video games stopped being minimalist, stopped being, I guess you could say, primitivist or whatever, and they started to become photorealistic, looking exactly like movies, is when they stopped being art and they kind of stopped being video games.
Yeah, they kind of started being just like shittier looking movies. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And it's interesting that you say that, because this is like when I got off the video game train was really when the PS1, probably like the second generation of games for the PS1, when the developers hit their stride, when like Resident Evil and stuff like that started coming out, and it was like they knew how to work the hardware, and I mean, PS1 was still pretty primitive by today's standards, but it was such a quantum leap for the time. From the Super Nintendo to that, it was really, it was a different world, right? And all of a sudden, you know, you're not filling in the blanks yourself, right? Like Final Fantasy VI, or well, 3 as it was called when it came out in the US, was a big deal. Like it was a big production for like 16-bit RPGs. I mean, it's the big one. But compare that to Final Fantasy VII, and it just like 7 blows it out of the water visually. It's huge. It's got so much going on and everything like that. But it's, you know, losing some of the flattening or the like compression of the visual aspect just alone. There was something that was definitely lost. Like, you fill in the blanks when you're playing these games, when you're listening to the music. You know, when I hear like Final Fantasy 3, like the original 3 for the Famicom, and I hear some of the music that's like playing towards the end of the game when you're in like the last dungeon and everything like that, it's just so exciting, and it just gets you juiced up and everything like that. But it's just these like little chip tunes and everything, but you hear it and you feel the full orchestra and everything like that coming through. You fill in those blanks, and to hear it like fully done, like, which I've actually heard when I went to see Final Fantasy Distant Worlds, which is exactly that. They just they have like a guy that has arranged all the music for like full orchestra and everything like that. It's amazing. Some of it is like unreal how good it is, but it's never quite as good as you envisioned it yourself. And I actually had this same experience when I was watching the Lord of the Rings movies, which a lot of people are like, wow, what are you talking about? Those are masterpieces. Yes, they are, but they could never equal what I saw when I first read those books. Dave, did you read the books before you saw the movies, or vice versa?
Yeah, of course. I read the books before I saw the movies.
Yeah.
I agree and everything, but I think those movies were so good. Like, for example, when I go back and I haven't gone back and reread Lord of the Rings. You know, I've read them once because they're so big. But it's hard for me to like picture Aragorn as somebody other than Viggo Mortensen now.
I know. It's in some ways it's like it annoys me because it's kind of it's copy pasted onto my memories of like the original stories. Yeah. But I still, like, to this day, picture Gollum differently than in the movies, because I just pictured him so vastly different when reading the books and everything. And Gandalf, I mean, I picture Gandalf as this like kind of like wiry dude with like a long thin nose and stuff like that. Not so much whatever the actor's name that like played him and everything. Like, that guy didn't quite look the part to me. It's a great movie. I would like, it's definitely like in my top 20 movies, let's just say, that series. It's great. I would never, besmirch it or anything like that. But it just couldn't live up. It could never live up to what I envisioned in my mind. And this is part of what makes, I think, Lovecraft such an effective writer. A lot of people don't like his style. I understand what they're saying. It's a little overwrought. But what he achieved as a prose stylist was to involve the reader to a degree in the participation in creating a horror, a scene of horror that was never achieved before him in anything. Maybe something like Beowulf. I think Beowulf works as a horror. It's sort of like a proto horror story. But
that's crazy. Lovecraft, I literally just thought that the other day.
Really?
Go ahead. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's just crazy. Go ahead.
On the same wavelength. But yeah, absolutely. It is a forerunner to that. But Lovecraft pushed it to a level that was so far beyond anything by not really sketching out. I mean, yeah, he certainly did describe Cthulhu and Azathoth and these things, but he left so much to the imagination that it becomes a participation with the audience, and that's what makes it great. I think that's like a huge reason why he's a legend. And this is, of course, what great poetry does as well. Like, great poetry doesn't tell you what to think about like what it's describing. It sets a mood. It uses words in such a way as to create a kind of space in which you can kind of fill in what is being said. At least certain kinds of poetry, maybe not stuff like Homer, but or like ancient ballads and things like that, like Sir Patrick Spens. Maybe it doesn't apply to that, but like modern poetry, the best kind of poetry that has been composed, let's just say in the last 500 years, for my money, is the stuff that leaves a lot to the imagination. And whenever I hear a really great like song lyric explained, like when I hear like a lyricist dive into explaining what their lyrics are about, I'm like, dude, I don't want to know. I just don't want to know. I'll just turn that off right now. It's gonna fucking ruin it for me. You know what I mean? So yeah. Anyway, I absolutely agree with that. And this is part of why lo-fi aesthetics are so powerful, is that they leave something to the imagination. They allow you to you participate as part of the creative process. There's a kind of dialectic that goes on between the audience and creator that I think is part of why even something like live music is so great. When you go to the show, there's a feedback loop between the audience and the band, where when the band gets excited, the audience gets excited. When the audience gets excited, the band gets excited. And you get this like building up and up and up. And when it really hits, when you go to a show and that dynamic is very, very strong, it's almost like ecstatic. You know what I mean? This is why people start moshing and stuff like that. This is where that all comes from, right? There's a kind of participation between creator and audience that these games, this art style, it lets you in. And this is part of why when you're listening to something like Dungeon Synth, I mean, it's very, very lo-fi in terms of what it's trying to do and the medium and everything, and even just like the cover art, stuff like that. But it draws you into this world, right? It allows you to inhabit that world. And I mean, this is part of what I just instantly liked about Dungeon Synth, even before I knew what it was.
Absolutely. And I want to say, speaking of, making you mentioned like love. I recently read a Lovecraft story. Horror at the Museum is one of his stories that I just recently reread anyways. And the moment you mentioned Lovecraft, I pictured the horror in the museum that's in the story. It's like he does such a good job of like making you torture yourself. He's like he gives you the outline, and then like you fill in the worst gaps. And I think that this is, and like when you said that, I pictured the entity that I created in my mind, and I had like a chill because it's terrible. It's nightmare. And when we talk about art in general, and with the 8-bit aesthetic, doing that, filling in the gaps, there's like something, I don't know. It's like when you hear these very simple things, when you see these simple things, it like does that. It recalls these creations that you've made in your mind. It like forces you to use imagination. And I think that's why people love it so much. And I think that's why Dungeon Synth has also gotten so popular. So a few of my favorite like Dungeon Synth like albums, I like some of the offbeat stuff, right? I like there's a project called Castle Siege that I like so much. It's it's like kind of what's the album? It's called Council of Trees. And it's kind of like weird and spooky and offbeat. There's a lot of like, like you know what I mean? Like kind of like spooky, dancey, folklory kind of shit. And what's
it called? Battle Siege?
Castle Siege.
Castle Siege. Okay, the audience is going to hear me type during this this segment because now I'm taking notes. I love Dungeon Synth and I need some new shit to listen to. So all right, hit me with it.
If you could bring it up for the audience to hear, Castle Siege. It's like the second track on Council of Trees called the Thieves Waltz or something like that. Waltz of Thieves or something like that. If you could bring that up for folks. I think
I'm too retarded, to be honest. I had to research to figure out how to do that for our songwriting episode.
Let me try to do it.
Let me see. Yeah, if you can. I don't know. All right, go ahead. Give it a shot. Oh, hey, look.
Hear that? Yeah, you guys. So that's I'm not gonna play the whole song for you, but that's sick, I love. It's like gnomes dancing around. I don't know. It's just like it's kind of spooky and weird. Like it's like you're in the Feywilds, and there's like these like talking trees and the tree ants and little like spooky trickster fey creatures and like I don't know. It's just weird, and I just love it. I put this on. I put it on and I start like my imagination goes nuts and I start like for some reason that song makes me wring my hands like I'm about to like hatch some sort of scheme or something.
That's amazing. Yeah, it definitely has that vibe. There's like some movie I can't remember. Like there's a lot of movies that like invoke that same like audio aesthetic or whatever tonality, and I can't remember what it is now. But anyway, it's definitely a good representative of that sort of thing. I think what we'll have to do is we'll have to have some show notes for this episode and just give our like recommendations of Dungeon Synth stuff to listen to. Yeah, we could definitely do some more like listening excerpts and stuff like that. Let me see if I can bring something up here. This one here. Is that? All right. Let's give this a shot. This is a black metal band. It's like actual black metal more than Dungeon Synth, but it's so heavy on the ambiance and stuff like that. And it's just so huge. Let's see if we can hear this one. It's got that wide open space kind of sound. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
There we go. Someone has thankfully time-stamped all the tracks. So that's the opening track, and then you got this one too, which is think they've actually timestamped it at the wrong place. All right, here. Yeah, this is the final track. This is one of those tracks that, like, if you just crank it up super fucking loud on like a big stereo system with a good subwoofer in the dark, it's a transfiguring experience.
Like you're going into the crypt.
Yeah. Something is happening here on the scale of millennia. You know what I mean? Like that's the scope, the weight of what I'm hearing right now. It's like, this is what good dungeon synth can really do for you, right? Anyway, this stuff is it's black metal, but it's really very glacial paced, right? It's very slow moving. All of a sudden, it will just like explode into like just like this thrashy, like super lo-fi stuff or whatever. But there's so much, like at least half of the album is just like stuff that sounds like that. So I figured that was valid to sort of include as like dungeon synth and everything like that.
Yeah.
But yes, so dungeon synth is a little bit different than in some ways. I mean, it's obviously tied up with the 8-bit aesthetic and everything like that, but everybody knows 8-bit. Everybody has heard of Super Mario, like Final Fantasy and things like that. Dungeon synth is something a little bit more off the beaten path, right? Like this is something that not everybody has experienced. It's something it's very cult, it's very niche, it's very obscure. You have to find your way into it, unlike 8-bit stuff, which you're swimming in, right? It's just part of the cultural background and everything like that. But I figured that it would be good to situate dungeon synth in a broader European electronic music timeline for us, because while it's a subgenre of a subgenre of a subgenre, right? It's a subgenre of metal. Black metal. Black metal's a subgenre of metal, and metal's a subgenre of ultimately rock and roll. So it is pretty obscure, but it also it sits very comfortably in a broader music timeline. So we'll start at the start, I guess, of electronic music. So in the late 19th century, we had, the 19th century itself was basically the high point of Western culture in terms of its science and technology. And one of the things that came out of that, of many things, was the development of electric music reproduction devices, right? I'm thinking of specifically the phonograph, which very quickly became common. It was in many households, middle-class households had a record player. Composers of the time of the late Romantic period even started to use them in their compositions. And you had the development of the telharmonium, which was a device that synthesized the sounds of orchestral instruments, and composers used that as well. Moving forward a little bit further into the 1910s, the era between, let's say, 1890 and World War I was a massive, it's a very, very fertile and interesting era. I want to do a whole episode on this era. It's called the fin de cycle. And one of the things that kind of comes out of this with the burgeoning era of World War I is starting to sort of mass, the clouds are gathering on the horizon. People can kind of see that something is coming or whatever. They feel that the speed and the violence and the energy of modern society, it needs to be reflected in art. And there was many movements sort of around this time. One of them was Dada. Another one was Italian Futurism. Italian Futurists, one of the things that they did, it was a very broad art movement, and music was one branch of that movement. And one of the things that they did was they had this gentleman named Luigi Russolo came in with The Art of Noises, which is like a manifesto, basically, of the future of music, incorporating unmusical sounds, things like the sound of industry, noises, and things like repurposed that were not musical instruments at all, being used in a quote musical context, or recontextualizing, refiguring what music could be. So the Italian Futurists were a very interesting movement in many ways, precursors to fascism, precursors to electronic music, and all kinds of, like, they really are something that I think our movement needs to study. Especially, it's interesting because, you know, the right wing, so to speak, is thought of as like reactionary and backward looking and everything like that. But there's a definite like Odinic, future looking, forward looking aspect to us as well. And Italian Futurists are part of that. So we're getting into, from there, World War I happens. It's a massive catastrophe. On into the 20s and the 30s, things kind of like start to get back on track in terms of, like, you know, technical development. We get the development of electronic instruments for the first time. We get the development of the theremin, which most people are familiar with. It's this wire, basically, that like it's like an antenna that like sits on top of a box, and you move your hand closer and further away from it, and it's like a monotonal, like, everybody knows the sound of a theremin. It sounds like Halloween, like it's woo, right? Like that is the theremin. That's what that sound is. You could think of others as well, like the ondes Martineau and whatnot. There were many electronic instruments that were sort of developed at this time. Only a couple of them sort of like were used like in actual classical and serious music composition per se. And classical music around this time, the 20s and 30s, starts to get really fucking weird, where there's a lot of experimentation with like microtonality. The 1910s with Stravinsky and like late Romanticism and early like modern composition, really pushing the boundaries of what music could be. I mean, that was going on from the middle of the 19th century. It was getting extreme by this point in time. So we get microtonality. So in the musical scale, the Western musical scale is 12 tones, right? From one octave to the next, there's 12 notes in between. But of course, there's a whole continuum of frequencies that you can invoke, right? Like tones between tones, microtonal, right? That's what this means. And electronic instruments fit in very, very well with that, because they are not tuned to a particular temperance or anything like that. They can produce any sound at all in a continuous frame and a continuum of notes. So you get composers like Charles Ives, you get Olivier Messiaen, Edgard Varese, who becomes very important later on as an influence on like some of the people that we all know, the people whose music some of us like even listen to, like Frank Zappa and everything like that. So that's the 20s and 30s. Electronic instruments are born. In the 40s, you get electroacoustic tape music. Now, in 1935, the tape recorder gets invented, but it's kind of janky and shitty, and it's not great for the medium, like for what it's intended for reproducing audio. But in 1935, well, that's when it was invented. A few years later, this technology called AC biasing was invented, made it much, much higher fidelity in the 1940s. And you get the birth of things like stereo recording. Tape, at this point, is actually superior to shellac and vinyl. It's always been superior to shellac, but it's even superior to vinyl because it's much cheaper and it even sounds better at this point. It wouldn't be until a bit later where that relationship would kind of reverse. And most importantly about tape, you can fuck with it in ways that you can't do it with vinyl, right? You can speed it up and slow it down. You can run it backwards. You can cut it and paste it. You can edit it like a film or whatever. You can loop it endlessly. There's all kinds of experimental shit that you can do with tape that you can't do with these other media. And it's really easy. And this is one of the important things. It's really easy with tape to create delay effects, echo effects, and reverb effects. This is actually like the sort of basis of how those effects ever came into being is through tape loops. And it creates, of course, as we know, reverb and delay, they create a sense of space. So delay makes it sound like you're inside the fucking Grand Canyon. Reverb, you can create a smaller but still very large space, like inside of a cathedral type sound, or inside of like a bathroom. You could do all kinds of stuff with it. And you can even create a sense of, those are like natural spaces, but you can also create a sense of like unnatural spaces too, things that the human ear was never meant to hear and like would never actually exist in real life. And so you get this weirdness starts to kind of creep into the picture as far as what we can reproduce sonically. And this is sort of the beginning of like the early roots of like what we might call psychedelia coming later. So you get composers like John Cage, who's a very important like experimental classical music composer, creates Imaginary Landscape Number 1, which is his piece where he like layers these like recorded tones one on top of each other, speeding them up and slowing down. You get the birth of like sound collage. So different elements sort of juxtaposed to each other, one coming one after another, and in ways that are sort of like a little bit jarring, or maybe like take you on a journey or whatever. You get Tristan Tzara, who is a very important like Dada artist, doing a lot of sound collage. You get Marinetti, who was an Italian futurist. And so this is like kind of the development that's happening in the 1940s. In the late 1940s, you get yet another development called musique concrète, which is, it takes tape. So like the advent of tape allows you to cheaply reproduce audio and record audio. And this is applied now to doing things like field recordings, recording natural environments. So like the sound of bird song or the sound of industrial equipment and things like that. You get natural sounds, environments, found sounds, like the sound of like, a stray bit of conversation sort of like spliced on top of something else, like that kind of like puts it like as a juxtaposition. It's like, this is, you get sort of the advent of the composition as a kind of, it's almost like musical journalism, where you're taking like a situation that you're experiencing and putting it into like sonic form and using that to create something completely new out of the situation. This would become important later for stuff like film and film soundtracks and things like that. So you're talking about guys like Pierre Schaeffer, who had this important piece called Étude au chemin de feu, Edgar Varese, who had now, if I would recommend anybody go and listen to the piece by Varese called Désert, or Deserts, as it's looks like in English. This is a really, really remarkable piece of music. It's basically sort of like a very early kind of like sound. It almost sounds industrial, but it also sounds dark ambient and things like that. And this is back in the 40s. So this is really, really like forerunners to like some of the stuff that comes later. In the 50s, we get another quantum leap where the development of computers gives us computer-based electronic signal generators. So we're no longer talking about like analog things like the theremin or whatnot. We're talking like real digital stuff. It's like a complete break with acoustically generated sound. You get composers like Karlheinz Stockhausen. You get computer-assisted composition. So you get composers like Yannis Xenakis, who is this really weird Greek composer. This is like starting to get very, very abstract, where he was actually trained as an architect, but then became an experimental composer and came up with a technique called stochastic music, which is basically uses probability algorithms and random chance to generate unique pieces of music based on like parameters. not based on like composition or like writing notes on a page or something like that, or even like writing down instructions on like how to play your theremin. He's like writing code basically, and this is generating music all the way back in the 50s kind of thing. So that's kind of like as extreme as it really ever got. In the 1960s, the technology had moved to such a point where it could actually be kind of like used to like make music that like normal people might listen to as well. You know, like you get the like advent of like live electronics and stuff like that. Still some weird shit that's going on. People are doing like circuit bending, which is taking like, you know, synthesizers, which are now starting to be developed, and creatively misusing them and, you know, customizing their circuits and creating like these one of a kind things or whatever. And this like one of a kind sort of like mad scientist guy in his garage tinkering sort of thing actually accelerates in an extreme sort of way the development of synthesizers. And in the 60s and 70s, that's of course what we get. In 1958, we get the RCA Mark II sound synthesizer, which is the first programmable synth. It's got the recognizable combination. Like anybody who's like a synth head will know the combination of signals. You know, you got your sine wave, you got your square wave, you got your sawtooth wave, and you got your triangle wave, and all of like those four like main signals can basically create just about any sound at all. So this is the development of the first synth where you can kind of like fuck with it and like make your own shit basically. In 1970, you get the very famous Minimoog, right? Which was very different. It was simple. It was portable. It was this affordable little thing that you could take with you on tour. So it's like, you know, Herbie Hancock's playing this. All the like hippie bands are using the Minimoog and everything like that. A year later, you get the ARPS 2600, which is pretty much the exact opposite. It's fully modular, patchable, totally flexible. You can, and the Minimoog has like a certain number of set like sounds it can make. This ARP thing is just like you could do fucking anything with it. It's pretty amazing thing. So in the 70s, you get these like weird electronic heavy sort of rock bands, right? A lot of them Germans for some reason, and we could maybe go into that a bit when we talk about the precursors of Dungeon Synth. Bands like Tangerine Dream, Can, Kraftwerk, and things like that. So that's kind of like, you know, at this point, synths are starting to become mainstream. You're hearing them in like top 40 music a little bit here. It's mostly weird stuff, but it's still a little bit in mainstream music. In the 80s, you get the advent of totally digital synthesizers and MIDI and stuff like that. So at this point, the synth is an important part of like what modern music sounds like. Bands like Depeche Mode, Duran Duran, Eurythmics, and things like that. You've got drum machines. Now, for the first time, the synth has come far enough where you can use these like, you know, 4 different kinds of signals to create what actually kind of sounds a little bit like a drum kit. You get the Roland TR-808, which is this is a very key piece of equipment to the like late 80s techno scene and hip hop and everything. And you get MIDI, which is basically the control of electronic devices by other instruments. You know, it's modular and patchable. You could control the drum machine with a keyboard, or you could control like a polyphonic synth with a drum pad or whatever. It doesn't matter. It's like, you know, plug and play. And in the mid to late 1980s, of course, you get the rise of chip tunes. And these are like built-in modules for sound chips like the NES, which was obviously done for affordability, but it's kind of like become its own retro sound. Into the 90s, electronic music is now popular music. There is almost no top 40 music, with the exception of maybe like metal and grunge, that has no synths at all. So it's fully penetrated into the mainstream by this point. And of course, in the 90s, what do you get? Well, maybe not in the popular consciousness, but you get the rise of black metal, right? So we last arrived, right? And you get this, it's got this lo-fi, you know, the important aspect of black metal is the intros and outros, those like long ambient interludes. You got these lo-fi synths with the dark ambient tones that harken back to like industrial sounds of like Nurse with Wound and Coil and Throbbing Gristle and things like that. But there's something important here, and I'm going to stop talking. I'm sorry, I've been ranting, but there's something important here to notice. It's a difference between what black metal is doing with the synth and what everything else has been doing with the synth, pretty much up until this point. Whereas all this electronic music from the 19th century on has been sort of striking forward into like new, uncharted sonic spaces, what black metal's doing, and especially the ambient elements of black metal that you hear in like Burzum and shit like that, they were striking backward to channel ancient soundscapes. This is something that had not really been done, maybe a little bit in prog rock, and that's it. You get the mixture of the synthetic sounds of the synth with the ancient tonalities, and this is very, very potent. You get this like Dorian modality, this move like, from E minor to D major, very well-worn mode in medieval music. It just sounds like the fucking Middle Ages to us. If you mix that with these like futuristic phase sweeps and like all kinds of like, ear candy basically, and make this into a whole genre, this really gives you something. There's like a tension, a paradox there. This like dynamism between like very ancient and very futuristic that produces these like creative possibilities, right? You've got like this nostalgia, like, these black metal bands, like what we just heard, are creating a nostalgia for like a place that's been gone for thousands of years that none of us have ever experienced. It's trying to re-enchant the world in a way that Duran Duran certainly is not, right? And this is part of, I think, what gives black metal its power and its mystique. And of course, much later on, decades later, they start distilling that like mystical ambient aspect of like the electronic music out of black metal, getting rid of the metal, and we have arrived at dungeon synth. So I think it's important to see that it does fit in with this like wider context of like European electronic music for like a century or more.
Yeah, that was a hell of a history lesson there, Mr. Mike.
It's a trip, bro. Yeah, it's been a long, strange journey.
I don't even know, dude. Dungeon synth is just, I don't even know. I don't even really have a take after all that. Yeah.
Sorry about
it's all good. I guess it's like you're talking, and as you're talking, I'm like here, like looking different things up, like I was looking up like the Roland drums and different like chord things. I was like, what simulators or what synthesizers was Mortice using? And I'm like looking up all this stuff as you're talking. I just think it's fascinating. I love this kind of this DIY, like do it yourself underground crypt thing that dungeon synth has. It's, I mentioned before, it's not like 8 aesthetics. So if you go on YouTube and you look up, if you go Google like retro aesthetics or 8-bit aesthetic, or if you look up like anything like that, you're gonna find like live streams that say like lo-fi beats. It has like some sort of, I don't know, some sort of retro looking character, anime, whatever, little animation, and there's like 20,000 people tuning into it in the middle of the night. You go Google dungeon synth. Now, I'll tell you, it is starting to get more popular. There's some pretty big YouTube channels that are starting to promote it. That's how I really got into it. I've always loved the sound of this kind of music. I've heard it on different various different types of other musics. I've heard, I ran into a band. There's like a project called feelz. I don't know if you ever heard of them.
I know that one. Yeah.
And one called Depressive Silence.
Yeah.
I ran into them, years ago. This was before I even knew dungeon synth was a word. You know what I mean? They call it like medieval ambient or something. I don't know what they called it back then. But I ran into them. I thought they were pretty cool. I came back around to it and I stumbled upon this YouTube channel. You guys listening that are fans of Dungeon Synth are probably already subscribed to the Dungeon Synth archives. It's absolutely a massive channel. It's an awesome channel. Like almost every day, every other day, the guy posts up entire Dungeon Synth albums. So I find awesome stuff all the time that I listen to. It has become a another like expensive hobby for me to buy cassettes and CDs and all this kind of stuff. And to be honest, the Dungeon Synth stuff really forced me to put my vintage sound system back together.
Ooh, yeah, it's great for that, isn't it?
It is, because without it, I can't listen. Well, I guess I could like put it on YouTube and listen to the speakers, but if you go and you get in the forums and you're yakking with the boys, or you got a bunch of boys that are like DS heads that are dungeon heads or any kind of there's also tons of crossover between Dungeon Synth and guys that like doom metal. Obviously, there's not really a lot of lineage between those two genres.
There is some very important structural similarities, though. But yeah, no, go on.
The guys that like one tend to like the other.
Yeah.
So if you get in and you're hanging with the boys, like you're in the streets with the boys, and you're yakking with these guys, you're like, oh, well, I just put it on YouTube and I listen to it, stream the MP3. They're gonna be like, that ain't it. You know, I mean, they're gonna bust your balls. They're gonna be like, yo, yeah, well, why don't you have a turntable from the 1970s to play your vinyls on, you piece of shit? You know, why don't you have an old Kenwood, bro? And like, so you gotta get. You know, if you're gonna roll with the guys, you don't want to be a poser. You got to get in. You got to do it the real way, right? But that's not my motivation. My motivation is because I love it. Because I love this kind of stuff. I love analog music. I love analog sound. I love old school sounds. So I put this together, and now I listen to my Dungeon Synth on the vintage system. And it's just it's beautiful, man. It's such a cool thing. If you're somebody that you don't have enough expensive hobbies, and I know there's none of you, but you should, but if you want another expensive hobby, become an audiophile and a Dungeon Synth fan and a doom metal fan, because these things bring there's not even words for it. It's just an enjoyment of a really cool underground niche thing. It's cult, right? There's only so many people that know about it, and it's pretty strange because we was talking about before, these like lo-fi retro not chip tune, but these like the kind of beats are completely adjacent to the Dungeon Synth. The guys that are making this the lo-fi beats and stuff like that, the retro beats, aren't using different equipment than the Dungeon Synth guys. Really, I'm sure the Dungeon Synth guys probably get a little bit more autistic with it. They probably have a little bit. They probably get a little bit crazier with it. Make their own VSTs or even I've seen guys that use analog that make their own analog synths that go that far. It's pretty incredible. Pretty incredible. The journeys that these guys go on to create these sounds, and it's really cool. I ran into a guy that had a at the gym, like last year, he had, I can't remember which, he had a shirt on, and I was like, what kind of band is that? He's like, oh, it's this thing called Dungeon. I was like, oh, so you like Dungeon? He's like, okay, so it's technically not Dungeon Synth. It's actually like more like epic fantasy synth with like 4 synth elements to it.
Getting into all these like niche like subgenres of Dungeon Synth.
The niche genre has more
the fucking iceberg below the waterline.
I was like, I just knew that he was like, this guy was somebody I could vibe with, and we had a good conversation and all that. But it's just like, that's just something that we do too. We take something that's niche and then just break it down and make it even more retarded. But there's something beautiful in how retarded that is. I don't know. I don't think that I don't think there needs to be a take for it. But with Dungeon Synth, I think Dungeon Synth is fucking cool, and it's got a dope vibe, and there's a lot to it that doesn't need to be explained. You listen to it, and what I do think, so here's my only real take on it, is that it protects the aesthetics and the vibe and the themes that are mythopoetic, and not mythopoetic in necessarily from the ancient world, but that too, but just from our recent history and memory. it really protects this undercurrent, these cultural motifs that were present and were retold in decades that were just the day before yesterday, and it keeps them alive. And it's in the crypt, and it's in the archives, and it's buried in these arcane eldritch libraries, right? But it's still alive, and you could go in there and it's magic. I listen to this music, dude, and just my imagination goes nuts.
Oh yeah.
I can't tell you how many stories I have started. My series that I'm like known for as a writer, the Lucius Lex series, the Grim Earth series, was cooked up when I was listening to Dungeon Synth. I was listening to Dungeon Synth, and I invented it in my head. I don't know. I just think it's great.
It's so good, man. Like sorry, what was that?
Go ahead, and then let's listen to some afterwards.
No, let's put something on, and then I'll give my deep take on Dungeon Synth after.
All right. So I want to show you guys. This is off the beaten path, and I want to show you guys this one, and then we'll show you some of the classics, because this isn't really one of the classics. This is just a Big Dave deep cut.
Nice.
All right. You guys are gonna like when I tell you about this and you hear it, you're like, oh yeah, no wonder fucking Dave likes this. This is called Barbarian King. The album is called Barbarian King. It is just straight Conan shit.
I can see straight away it's a subgenre of Dungeon Synth called Barbaric Dungeon Synth. Total fucking Conan shit right there.
I'm trying to find. Let's put on. This called Throne of Skulls. I love it. It's so good. You guys get it. I love that album. I can't get enough. Nice. It's so good. It's totally just like a sort of a ripoff of the. I don't want to say ripoff. It's very heavily inspired by the Basil Pasilioris or whatever his name is from the Conan the Barbarian soundtrack. It's totally just a retelling of that, and I love it because that's like my favorite movie soundtrack. I listen to that soundtrack like it's a band's album. I listen to it in my car.
It's really fucking good, dude. I had never actually I've seen the movie many times, but I've never really listened to the soundtrack until you basically sat me down and made me fucking do it. And then I listened to the whole thing while I was doing some like Imperium work or whatever. And I was just like, oh, this is fucking amazing. It's so good. And yeah, that totally channels the exact same vibe of like that fucking soundtrack. That's great, bro.
The same kind of tonal scales and everything.
The funny thing is, I'm pretty sure I've heard that before. You and I are such fucking Dungeon Synth nerds that we've like, it's birds of a feather, bro. We great minds think alike. We both like the same fucking shit. Yeah, Dungeons and it is a pretty special genre. I think like some people who are maybe like listening and being like, why did they like this Nintendo music? Well, like may not get it, but it is a pretty special genre. Like for me, I tend to go through stages or phases of being like obsessed with certain bands or genres or whatever. You know, in my youth, it was grunge was the one that really hit me. A few years after that, it was like Faith No More. So this was like weird rock or like unusual stuff, sort of like getting a little bit off the beaten path. That took me into prog, and I just completely did a deep dive into crazy, like, you know, amazing like musicianship playing and stuff from like the 70s and everything. And then I kind of came back to grunge for a little bit, and that led me on to punk. Punk led me on to post-punk, this sort of like getting into, again, sort of experimental stuff. And that led me into the industrial scene and really, truly like diving into the deep end of experimental music. And there, like, I keep bouncing back and forth between like normal music and crazy shit. And then, you know, going to Guided by Voices, who is this like hard rock band, this like lo-fi hard rock band that's just like fucking amazing. And then for some reason, actually I know why, it was because I moved to Australia and I didn't really have time to be immersed in the music scene. I had this like hiatus, and I hadn't like listened to any new music in like a long fucking time. And then, you know, at this point, I'm like starting to like wind up Imperium Press and get that going. And I discovered black metal basically. And it was through Philosophem, that Burzum record. And it just like binging that one and then all the Burzum albums while I'm like working on the early Imperium stuff. Like now Maestra reminds me of fucking Burzum somehow. Like it couldn't be more different, but
I know that's weird.
I know, yeah. It came at a very good time because I was just digesting The Ancient City. You know, that was something that had like recently come into my purview. I had just kind of given myself permission to be a pagan, and black metal has these like native European aesthetics. But what I liked most about black metal, and especially Burzum, was the ambient parts. I mean, I'd heard Burzum before. There was this guy when I was in audio school, like we all had to do a project and explain, like, you know, I think it was like do a report on like a music label, and he chose whatever label released like all the Burzum shit because that was like his favorite band in the whole world. I'd heard it and I didn't really think much of it. It was, I think, too lo-fi for me at that point. But when I heard this again later, many years later, it captured me. It stirred something deep in my folk soul. You know, I don't give a fuck what anyone says about Varg. Yes, he's got some wacky takes and shit like that, but the man has tapped into something. And then I discovered that there was a whole genre of this stuff. And this genre stirred something even deeper, right? It kind of got me back into traditional European music. And it's the weird marriage of like the childhood warm and fuzzies of like, you know, video games and stuff like that to traditional European music. It's very powerful. And it led to a period of rediscovery of traditional European folk music following on from Dungeon Synth. Because, you know, Dungeon Synth had just caught my ear. Burzum gets me hooked to the style. And although I had loved medieval music for a super long time, like when I was learning classical guitar way back in the day, I learned a little bit of John Dowland. I had this like tape of like, you know, Celtic inspired guitar music. So I consciously went back after discovering Dungeon Synth and started listening to like real medieval music, but that has been recorded by like, you know, musical reconstructionists that play the original instruments and have the original, you know, the scores and everything, and they perform it very faithfully to the music. And now this sort of thing and Dungeon Synth and black metal it's almost exclusively the music I listen to now, right? Like almost all I think if I think to what CDs are in my car right now, it's all one of those three genres, either folk music or black metal or dungeon synth. That's just like the wavelength that I'm on now. And, it may seem kind of trivial. Like, again, when we're listening to this stuff, it sort of feels like for someone who is maybe just discovering it for the first time listening now, or who doesn't like that sort of music or whatever, or is like into hip hop or something else, it's like, it may seem kind of trivial, but it's not. It's not at all trivial. It's part of the revival of primitivism. It's part of this move that's happening in the modern world, which I call the archaic revival. Like, we love dungeon synth. The reason why we love dungeon synth, in my view, this is my take on dungeon synth, is we love it because it's primitive and it's elemental and it's part of this archaic revival. And that term actually comes from a guy named Terence McKenna, but it's much, much bigger than him. He's like a proponent, like he's dead now, but he was a proponent of psychedelics. Yeah, and had some really wacky theories about how like human evolution was accelerated by the discovery of psilocybin mushrooms,
stoned ape theory, and all that.
Stoned ape, yeah, exactly. He's a very interesting dude, and his talks are always interesting to listen to. But this is much bigger than what he's talking about. How can I get into this? So if you think about like what our myths are in the radical right, and what by myths I mean something like the myth of like collapse, the idea, and by myth I do not mean, I want to make this clear, I don't mean a story that's not true or that isn't believed in, or that's believed in cynically or anything at all like that. Or I don't necessarily even mean like a myth as in like a narrative about the gods. I mean, so here's an example. The myth of collapse is one where many people in the dissident right, and not even confined to that, in well outside of that, believe that shit is going downhill and that we are going to undergo a devolution to a lower state of civilization. So that's one of our myths. Another one is what's coming into purview, and just a few people in our scene have kind of like latched onto it, which is what I call the myth of folk revival, which is basically the idea that third world birth rates are going down so fast right now. Modernity is hitting these people so hard, they have no natural defenses to it at all, that it is going to crush them in ways that are basically going to leave us as the last men standing. People are really worried about like white birth rates and white replacement and everything like that. I'm not at all worried about that, because I think that this is going to happen. Anyway, that's another myth and another story. You can think of something like the rise of identitarianism or the rebirth of nationalism. These are other myths. A myth is not an untrue story. It's an animating story. It's something that tells you the truth, but it points you in a direction as well. It says, this is so, like this is the case or whatever, but at a deeper level, it doesn't just tell you something about the world. It gives you a command. It says, this is the case, now go and do this, right? If you think of something like early Christianity, they have their own myth. Their myth was the myth of Christ's imminent return. So this is like, a proposition about the world. This is the case. This is what's going to happen. But really what it's actually saying is their myth is saying, go spread the word, and prepare for the end of days, right? It's like a imperative couched in the language of propositions. Well, I think our myth today, really the myth that ties all the other myths together in the dissident right, is what I'm calling the archaic revival. And by that, what I mean is that if you look at something like identitarianism, or whatever you want to call it, this is the rebirth of the ancestor cult in the modern world. The rise of white racial consciousness is the rebirth of that, coming back after thousands and thousands of years of being suppressed. It just is part of our folk soul. It is just coming up spontaneously from within our breast, it being reborn. You could think of environmentalism as another aspect of this rebirth of the archaic. This is the reborn, what's been called cosmic maintenance paradigm of religion, where what's happened since the axial age basically is a new direction that where the old direction that it supplanted was basically the radical participation of man in the cosmos. So the the Indo-European creation myth is a myth of we think of like the Ymir being dismembered and creating the world out of his body and everything like that. Well, the cultic reenactment of that myth is man participating in the world. It was believed by archaic cultures that the world had to be maintained by this like cultic participation. So by actually like undertaking the rites, you were actually reenacting the creation of the world and thereby continuing to allow the world to exist. And it was believed that if you stopped, or if those rites were ever, were ever cut off, that the world itself would come to an end. And what I think environmentalism is it's the rebirth of that. It's the rebirth of man's participation in the maintenance of the world. So this is environmentalism sort of coming back in its like modern form of this very ancient thing. You could think of scientism as well as the rebirth of magic. And I mean magic in the sense of, when man sort of like he says the magic words, it actually creates a response in the cosmos, like almost like an automatic response sort of thing. Anyway, I think all of these things are the archaic being revived in our world. And we've been seeing the birth pangs of this thing since the Renaissance. The Renaissance was sort of the beginning of a restoration of what is ancient. The Romantic movement went further back. Fascism in the 20th century went yet further back. And I think the dissident right is pushing even further back than that. Odin is coming, and he will lay the groundwork for the 1,000-year reign of Tyr. This is my belief here. We are living the history of the axial age backwards. We're moving from the early modern period back to the classical period, back to the archaic, and this is what's happening as we go forward in modernity. We're seeing this return to the archaic sentiments and aesthetics of the past. Modernism, the art movement itself, is very primitive. If you look at it, it's very primitivist. You think of the rise of brutalism in architecture. War as from the 20th century on, has just absolutely become total. Psychedelics, dark shit, tribalism, all these things moving away from what you might call beauty as in, say, like neoclassical understandings of beauty, towards something that's much deeper and darker and scarier, and that you maybe don't want to fuck with, right? This is where we are moving into modernity. We're seeing the rebirth of the truly archaic. And anyway, in its own very small and very cozy way, I think Dungeon Synth itself is also pushing us there. It's a movement that's been going on for centuries. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. In a very unformed and preconscious way, the liberal does see it, and he's very fucking disturbed by it. It's everywhere. And black metal and Dungeon Synth, they might seem kind of trivial and like laddish and sophomoric to us, like it's just shit for like shits and giggles with the boys and everything like that. But it's part of this wider movement that's taking us back to the root stock of our folkhood. Like, it's not for no fucking reason that people are starting to feel like they want to go back to the roots, like they want to revive our archaic folkhood. This is all happening for a reason. I think Dungeon Synth is basically one symptom of many in that process. Sorry for the long rant there, bro.
No, I love it. I love it. I'm just like here, just brainstorming on it. I love it, man. I think
it's happening.
I'm ready for it. I think that you're right. So let me ask you a question then. So you think that we're going backwards now? What was the point that it was kind of like hit its peak and then turned around?
So I would say in the early modern era, so we're talking about
Victorian?
No, before that. Early modern as in, let's just say when English moved from Middle English to like modern English. So like roughly in Shakespeare's time. So the early modern era now, like in our timeline. So let's just say the Elizabethan era, Shakespeare's time, was kind of like late antiquity, right? So Shakespeare's time is kind of like the collapse of the Roman Empire. And then we move forward in our timeline to the Enlightenment. And the Enlightenment is like getting pushed from the collapse of Rome back to the classical period. So we're talking about like the era of the Republic or the era of Greece and Plato and everything. There are very strong parallels between liberalism and the classical Greek philosophy and the age of Pericles and everything like that. And so we go forward from the Enlightenment to modernity, and modernity is starting to look very archaic to me. It's very archaic. Where like I listed all the shit, like, you know, psychedelics and, you know, the rise of like dark sort of like artistic movements and modernism as an art movement itself. Like if you look at Picasso, I mean, I don't like Picasso, but if you look at what he's doing, that looks a lot to me like the fucking, you know, cave paintings from 20,000 years ago. Shit like that. You know what I mean?
Big time.
It looks very fucking primitivist to me. If you look at like some of the weirder art like Beksinski, that looks, I mean, it's very refined, but it's also like strong and dark and searching, and it's pushing back to something like we're a long fucking way away from like scholastic philosophy of the Middle Ages. You know what I mean? If you look at industrial music, like the dark shit that we listened to in the post-punk episode, that to me sounds much, much closer to like tribal music. Like like the guy pounding on the inside of the pipe as the train goes overhead, much closer to like tribal music than Bach or something like that. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
We are moving forward into modernity, and as that's happening, we are sort of living backwards the move from the axial period into like late antiquity. We are living forwards what our ancestors lived backwards, if that makes sense. And we're coming to a point where we're going to hit the axial turn. I think it would carry us too far afield to go into all of that, but suffice to say that the axial turn is where things really, really changed. You know, reading Coulange, reading The Ancient City was such a fucking red pill for me, because whereas we have always been told everything that we know about history, what we learn in school, if we learn anything in school, what we learn about history tells us that Plato and Aristotle and Cicero and Julius Caesar and all of these people in the classical period was the beginning of of our story. That's the beginning of the West. What comes before that? Nobody fucking knows. It's night, right? It's completely obscured in darkness. We maybe talk about Homer. That's it. That's as far back as we go. But when you talk about shit like Plato and Aristotle and the philosophers and the pre-Socratics and everything, and Parmenides and all these guys, that's the beginning of our story. But when you read The Ancient City, you learn that that is actually the end of a much, much more interesting story. It's the end of something, not the beginning of something. And I think that the beginning of that more interesting story that lies in the distant past, in the prehistoric past, the past that has to be reconstructed by linguistics and comparative law and jurisprudence and all of this stuff, it's that much more interesting story that we are going to start living very soon. So I'm excited. I'm excited to see that come. It's going to come. I have no doubt about that. I've seen it. I've seen this. It's coming, and shit's about to get very interesting. And we're going to undergo some very hard times too. I mean, obviously, shit's getting fucking real. Shit's getting real for all of us.
Yeah.
We're not all going to make it, unfortunately. but we are living in the most exciting time in 5,000 years. It's exhilarating. So yeah, there you go. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you're saying that, I'm thinking about these dungeon synth tracks and how much they actually remind me of medieval music. Right? It's like completely archaic. A lot of the medieval music was literally you had a guy that it was not that much different than what you're saying. You know, the video game music only has a few voices. In a lot of medieval music, you had a guy with a hand drum, you had a guy with a racket, which was like this kind of like juggy, kind of like this like ducky, quacky kind of bass wind instrument, and then you had a couple of guys with flutes and maybe a lute, and like that was it. It was very primitive.
Yeah.
And when I listen to Dungeon Synth, when you're saying that, these maybe not connected, but when I hear Dungeon Synth, it's like the same sort of format, right? So I want to play two things. These are Please. The two things that popped in my head when Mike was talking, and I just want to bring it up for you guys. Let me see. Come on, Boomer, where are we at? Hang on, one second. Copy. Okay. So, where the hell is? Okay. Figured it out. Share screen. So here's one. This is another big Dave deep cut. I have these guys on cassette, and I love these guys because they have that. You were talking about the theremin sound. They have that. I love that wobbly theremin sound.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's probably not a real theremin. That's a VST that sort of has a similar sound. But you guys hear how it's only a few voices. You have the background, the backing ambient sound. You have like the theremin melody. You have a very simple kind of a percussion that could be played with the hand instrument. So anyway, I thought of that, and then a few others as well. And then I want to show you guys this. So this is a recreation. I believe it is a song written. We talked about John Dolan I think it was our episode on the electric guitar, maybe. I can't remember. But we talked about John Dolan, medieval music creator. And this is from an album that is a recreation, a rewriting of music that was around in the time of Shakespeare. Very fitting. You guys should go buy Four Great Tragedies. But this is music in the time of Shakespeare, and this is a song called The Earl of Essex Gilliard. You guys probably have heard this. Tell me that those two things don't have similar format. You're telling me the guys that Dungeon Synth that I played is from a band from Poland, I believe they're from Poland. Maybe they're Czech Republic. I can't remember which, but they're called Wind Tower. And that's from an album called Sins of Yore. And that song was called The Shadow Knight. They probably have, maybe they've heard this. Maybe they are a little bit influenced by this, but it's very strong possibility they've probably never even heard this stuff. They probably just heard video game music and played Dungeons and Dragons and loved Dungeon Synth and made their own, and just by, I don't even want to say accident or coincidence, just by the map, the blueprint in the folk consciousness, found their way to a similar format to medieval music. Dungeon Synth, go ahead.
No, it reminds me a lot of, especially the Dungeon Synth artist feelz. You know what I mean?
Big time.
They are really, really strong on like this. If you look up feelz 2, that is going to remind you very, very closely of like this kind of Renaissance era music. It's actually quite striking. Yeah, it's amazing how this is just sort of spontaneously arisen out of our folk consciousness, that we can recreate this stuff by osmosis, as it were, right? Without having heard John Dowland, which I'm sure many of these Dungeon Synth artists have not, just by having heard, a video game that's like imitating something that was meant to somehow resemble like, ancient or Renaissance era music, that we've been able to recreate this stuff like spontaneously. This is more than a coincidence. It's because this is who we are. It's because this stuff just spontaneously pours forth from us, and it comes out of us without even trying, right? At least some of us. And this is part of what it is to be a white person, part of what it is to be European, part of what it is to be an Englishman or a Northwestern European. This is just who we are. No other people can recreate it, really, without it being sort of an imitation. And we cannot not be that, right? It's just imperative that is who we are. So I want to play a couple of things very quickly here. One is that I think the old heads who are strong on their Dungeon Synth will recognize, but maybe a lot won't. It's this. Oh, fuck you. Shut the fuck up. Google or YouTube. Here we go. This one is such a vibe. It gives me something that I need. And what I need that I don't have in Australia is snow. It gives me winter. This is how I get winter, by listening to stuff like this. And just look at that cover too. Well, the audience won't see the cover. It's called Ornatorpet. Ornatorpet. It's everything about it is winter. The sky in the background, that like gray mottled sky with the birds flying overhead, the snow falling, and the figure walking in the snow with this weird castle. It's kind of indescribable, really. Very melancholic. And again, as I mentioned before, it vastly back and forth between that D minor and D major tonality. It just sounds okay, so the next one I want to play here, hopefully it won't stick a, there we go, is called Tomb Wizard. And this is a much more obscure one. I will plug this. Plug this channel called Transmissions from the Dark. It's a black metal channel, but every weekend, I believe it is, they have Dungeon Synth Sunday, where like you can see this here. This is like this like obscure Dungeon Synth record. It's got like 960 views or something on YouTube. It's, you know, pretty obscure. The band is called Tomb Wizard. The album's called None Darker. This is one of my favorites. You can hear the tape hiss. It sounds so lo-fi, so ambient, so chill. This is great music for you to just put on in the background, vibe out to. You don't have to concentrate on it. It just sort of envelops me. It just sort of washes over me. Very minimalistic, very dark, ambient. I love it, man. It's fucking Dungeon Synth. What can you say? Damn. What can you say? It's.
I'd like to go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's just. Yeah. What can you say? I can't really say any more than that. Sorry. Go ahead.
Now you were playing the winter one there, and I was just vibing, dude. That's good stuff.
That's one of my favorites.
I want to play something for you guys that's really interesting. So this isn't necessarily Dungeon Synth, but I just want you guys to hear it. So there's a guy that I've interacted with. I've become a little bit friendly with him. He's a musician. He used to be in kind of like the hippie scene out on the West Coast, and he do a lot of he does a genre that I would call like folktronic or folk step, right? It's if you listen to his early stuff, it's a little bit more what you would like consider to be like dubstep-y kind of spiritual stuff, because it has a lot of Eastern elements. But as his albums go on, he's starting to take on more sounds of like Dungeon Synth type voicings. So I want to play this song for you. This is off of his latest album called Calls from the Wood. And this isn't like Dungeons. This is dance music. So I'm going to play this because it's so interesting. There's nothing else like it. This is the kind of stuff that we could eventually play at our weddings. You know what I mean? So I just wanted to bring it up. Now we're talking about like the archaic art revival and archaic folk art and this kind of stuff, and it blending with technology and kind of mashing up and melting with synth and everything. I just think that this is appropriate. So I'm going to play this for you. This is called Starlit Stream. The artist is called Drum Spider with a Y, Drumspyder. And the album is called Calls from the Wood. Mike, I'm sure you can see on the screen.
Yeah.
Audience can't see. He drew this album. He draws all of his album covers. He's an artist. He's actually a hand drummer. He's a very talented hand drummer, but he's also like a electronic composer. He plays multiple instruments, guitar and all kinds of stuff too. But he puts on these really crazy shows where there's like fire dancers and women belly dancing, and it's very like wild and shamany, and it's really cool and entertaining. This guy's a very gifted creator and entertainer. But I want to play this for you. you get the idea. That fucks. I love that.
I could listen to that for an hour, bro.
That shit.
Where do I get his album?
You get it on Bandcamp, dude. This guy, fucking rules, dude. I've never heard. I hate dubstep music. I hate techno dance music. I hate that. It makes me want to puke. This like rules. I listen to this all the time. It makes me. Well, sometimes I'm like in the studio if I'm working, and sometimes I'll get like, I'm working, I'm drinking some mead, or I'm having a little something to drink, and I'm just vibing. If this comes on, sometimes I'll literally just get up, and start dancing. Like it really gets those 808s start bumping, and it's got the folk sound, and he's got organic. He's got like real instruments blended with electronic stuff. You know what I mean? That might be a real flute that he's playing. I don't know if that's a real.
It's well composed too. Like it sounds like it could be a composition from like, the French troubadour era or something like that. Like it sounds legit. It doesn't sound like he's just kind of making it up, right? It's very well done. Very well done.
It's a coherent like new genre that is like ours. You know what I mean? Like that, like I said, that's something you could put on the speakers at a wedding and everybody dances and goes wild. That's the kind of shit we need. You know what I mean? That's the kind of music that defines cult. Like you look at these like big Indian weddings, they play that Bhangra music. You know what I mean? And they just go nuts. It's the same thing. You go to an Italian wedding and they're dancing the tarantella, right? It's just like, trust me, I've seen it. Growing up, my mom's WAP. So I saw the tarantella dance. The old people, the young generations don't do it. But the old generation, when I was a little kid, you would see, Aunt Louise and Aunt Rosa and, great Uncle Tony, great Uncle Joe, and like everybody, the old heads, after they have some wine, they get up and they dance the tarantella, and you feel like you're in fucking Naples or you're in Calabria or something. They're just like, they're holding hands and doing the line dance and kicking their feet and getting low, and they just go wild. And it's like this completely uncaged, unfettered folk expression. And it's fucking awesome. And that's the sauce.
Fuck yeah, dude. Yeah, no. This is it. It's like, this is our time to revive something ancient and put a new spin on it, because the old times, as much as I was saying that like we are experiencing this archaic revival, it's not going to be just a repeat of the past. It's going to be, we're going to put our stamp on it too. And that's a great way to close it out. That's a great one to listen to, because it really is the revival of something ancient, but also what we're doing as well. And that's what Dungeon Synth is doing in its own more sort of like somber and serious and grim and crypt-like atmosphere and everything like that. This is just who we are. We cannot be anything other than that. And when we try, it doesn't work. And it leads us back to our roots ultimately. So it's wonderful to see that spontaneously coming back in our scene, in the folkish scene, especially in the folkish scene in the dissonant, right? It just seems to me that that's where all the energy is. That's where all the positive energy is. That's where all the wholesome energy is. It's where the vitality is. It's where the future is. So it's I'm very, very proud to be part of that, basically. And like, here's the thing about Dungeon Synth is that it had been around for decades before anybody gave it a name, right? Sometimes things are there right in front of you and you don't see them until they're named. This is actually this is a very deep ontological point that it's not my point. It's something that goes back to the ancient Egyptians, who believed that to be named was to exist, and to pass out of naming was to pass out of existence. It's why the pharaohs wrote their names on their tombs, and why their enemies the first thing they would do is efface the name in the tomb when they would break in or whatever, take it over. To be named is to exist, and to name something is to call something into existence. This is what's been done with Dungeon Synth It was there already, but somebody conjured it into existence by giving it a name. How many things are there out there for us right now under our nose that just there, but we pass over them because we don't have a name for them? There are so many things burgeoning in our scene that are happening just like that, whether it be a new literary genre, a new music genre, a new myth, whatever it is. It's our job. We are the onomasticians. We are the ones who name. I think the people, the focus scene specifically is the giver of names, and it's us who are going to project ourselves forward into the future. And it's, yeah, I'm very excited to be part of that.
Fire. And I'll say this, to give a name is a power that is wielded by fathers, by the dads, the culture dads. Yeah, it keeps coming back around. So speaking of the culture dads, guys, all you dads out there, man, we got love for you big time. I just want to take a little second and say we appreciate you. We got love for you. You guys that support us, that get into this, that support us financially, that sign up for our Gumroads and our Substacks, and buy our books and listen to our podcasts and everything. And, you know, we are not in our ivory tower. We listen to your feedback. We care about you. And we're doing this for you. We want this awesome. We want to put out awesome content that can educate you, that can, you know, lead you down different ways, your journey, your intellectual journeys, but also to entertain you and show you new art, new things that bring value and happiness and fun into your life and aesthetic value and all of the above. We just want to share this awesome, this wonderful knowledge and these beautiful cultural traditions. And because these things are precious and they need to be protected. And it is our job as the culture dads to protect them. And not just in like old manuscripts, whether it be vellum or, you know, whatever, but also the things that exist in our time that could be forgotten, whether it's on film reels, whether it's on cartridges, whether it's on cassette, or vinyl, whatever it is, or in print. This is our job in our time to not just protect the artifacts from a long time ago, but to protect the artifacts that are in living memory as well. So it's an important job. We've been given to it. It's a holy duty, and I believe that we are really going to succeed at it. I love it, and I appreciate you guys. And if you're not signed up already, which if you're listening now, you probably are, but I'm going to say it anyways. If you're not signed up already, go over to ImperiumPress.org/podcast and go get signed up to the Gumroad and get yourself some hardback books. So many great, dude. I have several of the Imperium Press hardback books, and let me tell you, they're fantastic. You can't get this anywhere. It's high quality. It's going to be on your shelf for forever and ever. You're going to give it to your kids. Excellent stuff. Go buy books. Check me out. TheBizarchives.com. Bizarchives 5 just dropped. It's coming out heavy. It's coming out strong. Go get yourself a copy. It's our best one yet. You're going to love it. So go check that out. TheBizarchives.com. Follow us on Twitter and Telegram at TheBizarchives. Until next time, dads, I'll see ya. Hails and blessings.